everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today, here live from COP27 and also remotely all around the world from our panelists. So my name is Sarisha Mann. I work on sustainable finance, engagement and communication at BNP Paribas, which is one of Europe's largest banks. Today, we wanted to put this discussion together from lots of different sector perspectives, but also from lots of different regional perspectives, because I think this COP is the COP of implementation. We wanted to really try to have a discussion today on some of those concrete solutions. I think a lot of the narrative around the climate crisis is quite challenging in terms of the science and the issues that we're facing. And we wanted to highlight some of those really innovative pioneers that are actually bringing concrete solutions to different contexts around the world. So with that, I have the pleasure to introduce our fellow panelists today. So I'm joined by Michelle Mbu Tushawel. I think I've hopefully pronounced your name correctly, Michelle. And Michelle is actually the co-director of African Women in Agriculture Research and Development Award, and is also representing the One Planet Fellowship. And we'll share perspectives on some of the projects and how you're really upscaling on the technology and entrepreneur side. We're also joined by Ignace Supres, who's the CEO of Sunna Design. We're joined by Axel Reynard, who's the founder of Net Zero. We're also joined by Jean Moreau, who is the co-founder of Phoenix. And last but by no means least, we're joined by Oliver Warnen, who is a partner at BNP Paribas Solar Impulse Venture Fund. So with that, we're going to start with the panel today. And we wanted to give a little bit of a scene setter as well in terms of what we were hoping to get out of discussion. I think it's really about showing the concrete implementation that's possible and having this discussion around the levers that are required as well. I think collaboration has been discussed quite extensively at this COP. I've been at COP for a few days now already, and I think collaboration is a really common theme across lots of different sectors, and we're going to delve into that more practically today and what that means. From helping smallholder farmers in Africa to climate change and looking at some of the science. We're going to also be exploring today some sustainable agriculture strategies, looking at technology solutions, looking at renewable energy, also looking at tackling, for example, food waste. We're going to be looking at some of the leading entrepreneurs and innovators in the space who are joining us today. I think some of this will also focus on the African context. I think it's very important to say that this COP27 is obviously in Egypt on the African continent. And so we're going to be sharing some of the examples from organizations that are joined with us today that have amazing concrete solutions and actually impact as well. I think often people may not focus as much on the impact of what's achieved. And I think all of our panelists will be able to share a little bit on that as well. So without further ado, I'm going to actually ask the first question to Michelle. Thank you so much, Michelle, for joining us today. In terms of your representation, you're the co-director of African Women in Agricultural Research and Development Award, but you're also part of the One Planet Fellowship. That was an initiative, for those of you that don't know, that was funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And also we know that BNP Paribas has played a part in that as well over the years. With Award, I think you're engaged really interestingly in the implementation side of the One Planet Fellowship. And I think when you look at what that means, it means building a really highly connected, vibrant community of scientists, leaders, entrepreneurs, really trying to foster the kind of next generation of leaders as well. And I think some of the work that you're doing is really focused on helping African smallholder farmers adapting to climate change as well. I think this year at COP, we're noticing that adaptation is really high on the agenda. And so we wanted to ask you how the One Planet Fellowship actually helps support climate action with different stakeholders. And could you share some examples of how you're doing that?
Thank you so much, Saisha. Thanks for having me on this roundtable to discuss the critical role of science and innovation in the delivery of appropriate solutions to climate change. At Award, we believe that research and innovation holds transformative potential to help smallholder farmers and their communities cope with the inevitable effects of a changing climate. However, when we look at this process, we also see that it requires a solid and inclusive stakeholder engagement, and this to ensure all voices are heard And mutual knowledge can contribute to a healthier and sustainable future for Africa, for its people, and also even globally. As we all know, these stakeholders today includes the African youth, who have to confront the growing environmental challenges and also contribute in different ways to the policy debates around the climate crisis and agricultural transformation in the continent. How then can we support them effectively to achieve this goal today and for future generations? This is one of the questions that have informed the design and implementation of the One Planet Fellowship, which is a 5-year initiative targeting over 600 African and European scientists for its first phase. The initiative aims to sharpen the scientific skills and particularly knowledge on climate change processes and innovative solutions for adaptation and mitigation. It also contributes to enhancing the scientists' capacity to integrate gender and other social dimensions into research and innovation so that we can see how this solution effectively responds to the constraints, to the needs, to the priority of diverse population group. As we all probably know here, climate change affects people and groups in different ways. And it is important that the research, the innovation, the advocacy and policy processes account for these considerations. The initiative One Planet Fellowship also aims to catalyze research partnership, strong networks for evidence-based advocacy, and more importantly, co-creation of context-based or specific solutions for smallholders in Africa and across the world. We are particularly proud of the achievement made so far in terms of building a pipeline of African and European scientists and research institutions working on the multidimensional impact of climate change. We've also seen research collaboration between young scientists from different African regions. We have initiated the scientific mobility of these researchers. And what we are really very proud of are the inspiring stories that the researchers have been telling us about the outcomes and impact of their research on their communities. So it's actually this whole package of stakeholders that makes the One Planet Fellowship. Let me stop there for now.
I think we could listen to you all day, and I think we will feel like that with lots of the panelists too. I think your insights are incredibly valuable in what you've said there. There's many amazing levers in terms of intergenerational learning, in terms of the idea of scientific mobility. That's incredibly important. I think as regions tackle and grapple with issues to do with adaptation, this inter-regional learning will probably be much more important. And I think it's amazing that the One Planet Fellowship is helping to facilitate that. The point about the knowledge and scale is absolutely vital. I think that the scalability, when we look at that, requires the science. And I think by bringing all of those parties together as One Planet Fellowship, it's really powerful. And finally, the youth, I think I wanted to reflect a little bit on that too, because I think this is the first time at a COP that we've had a youth pavilion, the Children's and Youth Pavilion. I stopped by there earlier today, and it's really inspiring to see the central role that the youth plays in this dialogue, and I think it's amazing how you're bringing that together, both from an intergenerational and also inter-regional level. In terms of the implementation, just moving to Ignace at Sana Design. So Ignace, in terms of what you're working on, you're the CEO of Sana Design. You're leading on solar energy management, which is actually looking at autonomous and connected applications. So from a technology perspective, you're really at the forefront of that. Looking at solar street lighting, for example, and also applying solar for different business models. So how does Sana Design apply solar technology in different contexts?
Hello to all. Thank you, Sarisher. Well, the basis for Sona Design core technology and expertise is really about managing solar PV production, energy storage, and a battery management system with a number of algorithms to provide energy 365 nights per year. And we developed a core technology to deliver that. And the mission of the company is really to build a more, to bring lights in area where you don't have light, where you don't have electric networks. And in fact, what we found initially is that public lighting, street lighting, is a huge lever for economic and social development in off-grid areas. Several 100 million Africans still don't have access to energy today. And it's a major challenge we are fighting for. And in fact, a lot of our work is dedicated to deploy large lighting infrastructure projects across African countries. And just to give a view also, the technology is very mature. We developed a very solid technology, very well suited to the environment. And it's important to understand that we can apply this type of solar technology in very different contexts. In Africa, we need to have very robust technologies with batteries that will resist very harsh environments, a lot of sand, a lot of extreme temperatures. And in fact, we are currently deploying a project, for instance, across Togo, across off-grid areas in Togo, deploying 50,000 units, 50 solar lighting units across Togo. Okay, and we experience every day the huge change it makes to the life of people living in those villages. And therefore, we are very glad to advocate for the wider deployment of such programs, to also make a call for action to all the partners, to all the financing partners, to all the activists and companies working across Africa to support and accelerate the deployment of such projects. Okay, and I see you show another visual, and indeed, this solar lighting technology also has a very strong value proposition in mature countries, in more electrified environments. And in fact, we provide some very concrete and easy to deploy solutions to tackle major issues about decarbonation of the energy mix, bringing resilience to public lighting, and well, as well, of course, reducing the energy bills in a context where energy costs are skyrocketing. So it's also a very interesting example of a technology that was initially designed for off-grid countries, for African countries with a social impact, and that down the road have a very strong value proposition as well in much more electrified environments.
And that's brilliant, and thank you so much for sharing those insights. And in what you just said, there's a lot of really interesting points there. I think the technology transfer is super interesting. It's not so often that you hear examples being shared of technology being applied in both contexts, in terms of perhaps in rural areas of countries that are really needing much more energy access, and then equally in markets and places where it's much more established, such as having an electrified grid. And I think it's amazing that Sona Design is looking at that whole holistic prospect of scaling up solar energy. The other thing that's very interesting in what you said that we'll reflect on with some other panelists is this interplay between the environmental, the economic, and the social value creation. I think in looking at how solar lighting can transform lives, it's very powerful. Some of the examples you shared with Togo and other contexts, that you could actually change people's lives through giving them access to light and clean light as well. So thank you for sharing that. Just a reminder for everybody on the call, you can submit questions via the Slido link. I think it's just appeared on the screen there. So do get your phones out and use QR code. I think there's a Slido code there as well. So do feel free to submit questions. We will be taking those at the end, and we'd encourage you to submit questions throughout. Lots of interesting things that our speakers are going to say. So please don't be shy and do definitely ask questions. Just moving across to Axel. Thank you, Axel, for joining us today. You're the founder of Net Zero. You're also looking at some really interesting technologies from a scale-up perspective. You won the X Prize Carbon Removal Milestone Award, which was actually funded by Elon Musk. He's obviously a huge entrepreneur in this space and really pioneered a lot of that technologies. And I think the testament to your vision and entrepreneurship there. Net Zero is really interesting in terms of being a climate venture specializing in long-term carbon removal from the atmosphere, particularly looking at agricultural residues using a technology known as biochar. Biochar is a super fascinating material, and I think I've spent a long time looking at the prospect of that, and it's really exciting that you're joined with us here today. So how can you share with us an example of how Net Zero is actually harnessing biochar as a climate solution, and maybe also explain a bit about what biochar is, because it might be new to some of the audience to hear today, and how you're applying that technology.
Thank you, and very happy to be here. Yes, maybe I'll say a few words about biochar, and then we talk about Net Zero, what Net Zero does. So biochar is essentially carbon that was captured by plants through photosynthesis, and that is extracted and stabilized in the form, it looks a bit like charcoal powder. And so it's carbon that was in the form of CO2 in the atmosphere, was absorbed by plants through photosynthesis. If we had not converted this carbon into biochar, when plants would have decomposed or would have been burnt, the CO2 would have gone back into the atmosphere. And here it's stabilized for hundreds of years. And so it's a kind of super simple, basic technology called pyrolysis, which is similar to the one we use to do charcoal, and that has been known for thousands of years by humans. But it happened that this biochar has very interesting characteristics. And so we try to leverage both the climate impact and the agricultural impact into a model that would be scalable. And that's what Net Zero is trying to do. At Net Zero, you can use any kind of biomass to create biochar. We use crop residues in tropical developing countries. And actually, our first plant is in Cameroon. And by using crop residues, this is very abundant. You don't need more land because anyway, you grow the stuff for eating, and then it happens that there are some residues. You don't need more water. You don't need more fertilizers. And basically, it's a waste that we try to convert into something useful. Biochar, when produced, so this kind of charcoal powder, the first characteristics is that it's stable wherever you put it. You might dump it in a hole, mix it with the soil, put it in a mine, leave it in a pile, whatever. The carbon will not decompose. And so that's for hundreds of years. It's validated by IPCC. And so basically you take away carbon from the atmosphere for hundreds of years, and that's very high quality carbon removal impact, and that is needed. As we all know, IPCC says, of course, we need to reduce emissions, but there will be some residual, about 5 to 10 gigatons, and this we need to remove. And biochar can contribute 1 to 2 gigatons. So actually, about 20% of the total objective. So it's massive. The second thing is that this carbon that has been removed from the atmosphere can be useful. At Net Zero, we use it basically as what is called a soil amendment. So we mix it with topsoil. And when mixed with the soil, basically it improves the quality and the health of the agricultural soil, especially in tropics where soils tend to be acidic, tends to be relatively poor. Biochar helps retain water, helps retain nutrients, helps correct soil acidity. and very important, helps develop microbial life in the soils. And the net result of that is that you get higher yields and you can reduce usage of fertilizers. And so this is very useful in countries that are trying to ramp up their agriculture and trying to move away from usage of fertilizers. And then the third magic property of biochar is that actually in the production process, you generate lots of flammable gases. Part of this energy is used to heat the biomass and sustain the pyrolysis process, but then there's extra energy, and this energy is used to produce electricity. And here, I would look back to what Ignace was saying, producing electricity in rural areas of tropical developing countries actually has a lot of value, and can help change lives. So at Net Zero, what we're trying to do is to say we have this kind of magic product, but that hasn't found a model to scale. And to scale it, we need technology, we need funding, we need a lot of things. And what we're trying to do is to find the model that will help scale biochar. We think in the tropics alone, we could remove close to 1 gigaton of CO2 per year, leveraging biochar and leveraging, leftovers from crops. So this is a huge challenge, and maybe later on we can discuss how to scale that.
Thank you, Axel. And I think it's amazing in terms of the potential of that technology as well. I think we hear increasingly the importance of nature-based solutions, but I think you shared with us some very quite practical points about how biochar can be very helpful for solving both the climate and biodiversity issues. I think in what you said about the fertilizer reduction, I think there's a really interesting point there. The point about generating energy as well, and the fact that it could be recycled as an energy source is amazing. And crucially, the point about the local impact that can have, and the idea that this technology and really, I guess, the more than just technology, it's actually the process to create that could have huge potential in terms of supporting rural decarbonisation is very interesting. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. I know later we'll explore a bit more in depth about how that could be scaled. Just moving across to Jean, who is on the line with us today as well. So Jean, you are the co-founder of Phoenix. Thank you for joining us today, and you created that with your colleague Baptiste Corval. And in terms of Phoenix as well, you play a really interesting role in developing partnerships that tackle food waste. Really interesting in terms of how you're actually supporting that area by looking at a digital platform. So the idea that digital technology can be a really big enabler to actually look at food waste, which we know is a huge contributor in terms of issues to do with climate. So you look at how to connect distributors with unsold products, and then other organizations receive this flow. So the solution is actually quite holistic in terms of how you can play that intermediary role, particularly adapting it to rural areas. We wanted to ask you a little bit about that today. So how does your solution tackle food waste, and how do you actually work on that in terms of some of the project examples of what you're doing now? Thanks.
Thank you very much. And hi, everybody. So I am Jean, the CEO of Phoenix. We decided to tackle food waste back in 2014. And why is it important? Because food waste is a massive social, environmental, and economical disaster. It's less known, but if food waste were a country, that would be the third CO2 emitter right after China and the US. So we do have a role to play in climate change by tackling food waste. It's also a nonsense because on the one hand, you have a lot of companies, retailers, industrials that are producing and then destroying. And on the other hand, you have hundreds of millions of people that are suffering from undernourishment. So we wanted to connect the dots and to put some common sense back in the system and to make sure that those who have too much can connect with those who have not enough. So we decided to develop two technological tools with the support of BNP and Solar Impulse. And I want to thank them for that. We developed first a B2C mobile application that connects the retailers, supermarkets, hypermarkets, any shop that has unsold products that are reaching their expiry dates, so D-2, D-3, D-4. And those products, instead of being destroyed, landfilled, incinerated, are sold with a discount for consumers. So it's at the same time a way to do something against food waste and for the environment, but it's also, in the current environment, a great means to recover purchasing power and to fight inflation. So that's the first thing. B2C mobile app to empower consumers and to make sure that everyone can do its part against food waste. Second thing is we connect the same supply, industrials, producers, farmers, and distributors, with also the charities network like food banks, Red Cross, and so on, to make sure that nothing is wasted, nothing is destroyed, everything that can have a second life has a second life, and we are in the what we call the circular economy, so that the excess capacity of some are the resources of others, and we see waste as a resource and not as a pain point, and that's this model that has enabled us to save more than 200 million meals since inception. So we are very proud of this impact and proud to walk on two legs. We have a business because we are a for-profit company, and there is no problem with that. But at the same time, we have like a strong social and environmental impact, and we are very proud to have this dual DNA. And we do think that those models are the models of the future. So, and I think it's replicable, scalable, and replicable in developing countries, because we all face the same problems. People with excess capacity, products that are about to expire, and no solution. And on the other hand, you have people in need, people looking for food, and there is no point in destroying. It doesn't make sense. It was an absurdity of the 20th century, but now it has to come to an end. So we are part of the solution, and we are not the only player on this field, but we are part of the solution, and we are ready to deploy it everywhere is needed.
Thank you so much, Jean. And I think in what you've just shared with us, what's very interesting is that you're looking at creating social value from having a circular process, and similar to Axel and the others as well. I think what's very interesting is that you're generating value from what is perceived as waste, whether it is the waste from a certain agricultural process, or in the case of Phoenix with food. And I think the fact that you're applying it in both contexts, again, is very similar. I think you've got a lot of common threads across our panel emerging. I think one, in terms of this interplay between applying technologies in both contexts. I think often people maybe silo those applications, but I think what's powerful here with the panel that we've got today is you're actually bringing your technology into both those contexts, both a rural and potentially a more developed context. You're also bringing value from waste, and I think we'll explore a bit about some of the levers of how to do that later as well. And moving on to Olivier, thank you so much, Olivier, for joining us today. So Olivier is a partner of BNP Paribas Solar Impulse Venture Fund. That's basically an investment fund that was created to support clean tech entrepreneurs, innovative startups, and those working on ecological transition. So the size of that's actually quite large. So it's managed by BNP Paribas Agility Capital. It's now actually intends to invest 150 million euros in high potential startups that are committed to the transition. Olivier, so how is BNP Paribas Solar Impulse Venture Fund actually working on powering clean tech solutions?
Sure. Hi, Sarisha. Hi, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to join this panel. So we're indeed a venture capital fund. So like every venture fund, we're actually taking minority equity stakes in startups. We're focusing, as you said, on the ecological transition. So that's a broad spectrum of investment, covers energy, mobility, smart cities, circular economy, ag tech, food tech, and biodiversity. Maybe to better understand what this initiative is about, a few words on the background and how we met with the Solar Impulse Foundation. On the BNP Paribas side, we've been investing in startups for the own account of the bank since 2016. We're actually deploying a 100 million euro envelope of the bank's money That was one of the bank's commitment at the time of COP 21, sorry. At this time, it was COP 21. And part of the commitments the bank took at the time was to put its own money at work, supporting, innovative companies acting for the energy transition at that stage. So we've been doing that, build a dedicated team. We've made 12 direct investments in companies in US, in Europe, including Sona Design back in 2017. And the idea from the very start was, support innovation, help those companies grow any way we could. Almost 2 years ago, we got aware that the Solar Impulse Foundation, which obviously the bank has been very close to for years, was contemplating the idea of putting together an investment fund. Keep helping and supporting the efficient solutions they had labeled. It's probably worth giving you a few words about the foundation. So I'm sure the audience is well aware about the foundation, but in any case, so it was founded by its founder Bertrand Piccard, very well known for its tour around the world using a solar plane. So that was 6 years ago, and at the time he had this vision that the technologies that we needed to solve the climate change issue or have real massive impact on that, all those technologies were already around. They needed to be seen, shown to the world, scaled, deployed at scale, so that we can actually have an impact. And the great idea about this label that he created at the time was using external independent experts to assess those solutions, those technologies. So 3 experts will look at each of those technologies, assess them according to several criteria. What we really liked is how pragmatic this approach was, because it's not just assessing the credibility from a technological point of view. It's also looking into the impact on the environment and the profitability of the solution. So will the startup make money out of it at scale? And the interesting part was from the client perspective, using this innovative solution, will they make money switching a polluting standard solution against this new solution? So we really liked what they had done and the strategy they had. So when they asked the partners who would be able to help them put together a fund, we raised our hand and we found actually ourselves. We were very complementary. We had the experience, we had the team, we had the management company that you mentioned, AMF, also approved by the French regulator. The bank was also willing to put more money at work supporting the innovation. So we decided to put together this fund, 150 up to 200 million euro fund. BNP Paribas will be investing half of it, and so that's a very strong commitment from the bank. But what was new is that we wanted to open that fund to other partners of the foundation, large clients of the bank, like-minded investors. So really, corporates, institutional, family offices with the same view that we needed to support innovation to fight climate change. Broadening that scope to ecological transition, so a broader stage, but really with the idea that it was about helping those company groups. So really, it's a bit of a mix of a corporate venture. We're a very large firm ourselves, and we've been leveraging our network around the world, helping those companies. But this time, we're doing also with other partners, investors, and we're hoping to have a much greater impact, actually, working together with the foundation and our own investors.
Thank you so much, Olivier. And what you've touched upon there, it's very interesting. And you mentioned it actually as announcing that at COP21. I remember going to COP21 with BNP Paribas when they announced that back in 2015. And I think what's interesting is that now, if you look at, now we're at COP27, you see that actually the power of those partnerships at the time and the commitment of bringing the ecosystem together can lead to quite interesting scalable solutions. I think we've heard that today with some of the entrepreneurs that have been funded through the Solar Impulse Foundation, and it shows that actually there is a real value in bringing that whole ecosystem together. I think COP as a process is obviously quite governmental led, but there are a lot of things going on, and this discussion today is an example of that, of where you bring the ecosystem together. It actually has a huge power to create scale and do that from a form of implementation. It goes beyond just commitments to actually concretely, as Jean shared, 200 million meals saved by people. Like, these are real world, real life impacts, and these are really powerful things that we can do when we bring that ecosystem together. So just transitioning slightly onto the second part of the panel, and I would again encourage you all to submit questions via the QR code, which you saw earlier. We're now going to look at some of the levers that are required to accelerate the scale up. I think we've all mentioned on the panel some of the things that are important to scale, but we wanted to really touch upon the levers and delve into those a little bit further. So starting with Michelle, so what levers do you think are critical for scaling up this, both regional, but also the industry mobilization? I think all of the panelists have touched a little bit upon the interplay between the industry scale and the regional scale. So what do you think is required to do that, particularly in the context of African entrepreneurs? It'd be great to hear your thoughts on that, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Sarisha. I think we can even add other levels, not just the regional, even at the country level, the continental level, and other sectors will definitely benefit from this solution. But let me just look at it from where we're coming from and what we have seen at 3 levels. First, I think there've been a lot of enthusiasm around the idea of building a mentoring culture. As you know, some of our entrepreneurs, some of our researchers, innovators have actually been working like in silos, in isolations. And to us as a world, we have really been thinking about how we can really push for a mentoring culture that will bring that those synergies, and also help us foster intergenerational collaboration, support the development, the visibility, and also how the innovators and entrepreneurs will be able to influence climate collaborations. It is really important that in this process, all these young innovators and entrepreneurs realize the potential of their research and use these results for the benefit of their people, and particularly those who are operating at the margins with limited ability to cope with climate change. Secondly, there are several opportunities for African youth in technology development and enterprise. It's so refreshing to hear all the other panelists have shared here, and that I've also heard in the program about the biochar technology, about the waste, about solutions, solar solution, and other renewable solution. For me, it's really important that we keep this learning. I believe that there is a lot we can do working together to see how this technology development can be a driving force on the road to achieving sustainable development goals. For us, we need to continue to encourage our young innovators and researchers to become the centerpiece in this process by showcasing their creative ideas for entrepreneurship, by connecting to different learning opportunities. I wish I could have brought some of them here to discuss with all the other panelists, and definitely putting together efforts for joint project and initiative. Thirdly, many of these young researchers are very talented. They are passionate, they are hopeful about the future, but unfortunately, this isn't enough to bring the dreams to reality. We need more concerted and sustained efforts to forge the linkages and the networks with the scientific and the innovation community. And definitely the substantial investment, I've heard someone talking about investment in startup and also innovative financing models are also required so that we can open access to the latest technologies and even support more of these young innovators to participate in forums like this COP27 and those who are coming. We need this to be sure that we can see appropriate tools for them to design and lead actions. And finally, for us, One Planet Fellowship is one of these examples of strong financing collaboration between the private and the public sector. This is definitely a unique partnership of different fundings, and the fellowship has benefited from this diverse investment by the private philanthropists and also public research. You've mentioned the BNP Paribas Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Canadian International Development Research Center, and the European Union. We really think that there is room to sustain this momentum and welcome new partnerships at different levels on this journey towards mobilizing more researchers and young people to work for climate change.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I think one really powerful thing you said amongst many there was this idea that researchers can realize the potential of their research. I think one thing that's very interesting about the discussion today and generally the COP process is the idea of democratizing some of the research and bringing the research community to have a seat at the table, and a seat at quite an influential table in terms of with investors, with corporates, with governments. I think this democratization of that knowledge is absolutely vital, and in what you've said of raising the voices of those researchers, I think the work of the One Planet Fellowship is absolutely essential there. The Keep Learning is really exciting. I think hopefully on the panel today everyone will get a perspective of that. Just moving, conscious of the time because we do want to allow time for a bit of Q&A as well, across to Ignace. So Michelle also mentioned the power of knowledge sharing. And in what you're achieving with Stunner Design, can you share with us how important knowledge sharing is to actually scale up solar solutions, particularly some of the industrial design that you mentioned?
Yes, I think one key in our model to scale is really about partnering with local and creating some local knowledge about solar lighting. I think it's a key principle for us, and it's very interesting because there was a question raised on this topic, and definitely for us it's key because we have a vision of sustainable development, of solar lighting as a pillar for sustainable development. So it's not only bringing life, bringing social impact. It's also about training people and creating some local jobs for the people and transferring some know-how and competencies. And to the question that was raised, clearly our model when we deploy projects is really to rely fully and 100% on local partners who have local employees, local people who are very well inserted in the local decision making. You know, lighting is very much related to territories, to local authorities. So for us, it's very important to bring some job and some content and some value for local people and local jobs. And that's when we deploy a project, and over the time of the lifetime of the projects, it's also critical for us to train people locally. And it's also very much related not only to our vision, but also to the very nature of our assets, infrastructures. When you deploy tens of thousands of street lights across the country, you need to be everywhere, to have some people trained everywhere. And that's the reason why we have created a SONA University that we use to create some local knowledge and train local people, most often young people, to maintain the equipment, to get some knowledge about battery storage, about solar PV. So I think it's very important for us, this knowledge transfer and knowledge sharing in our vision of sustainable development. And I would add 2 points, in fact, and Michel mentioned that. Also in knowledge sharing, we have a big challenge also in innovating, in deploying innovative financing scheme to deploy at scale such infrastructure. We are very happy to have BNP Paribas as a partner, as a shareholder of Sona Design, bringing support to this huge challenge. And we are really trying to innovate on the field because the needs are huge. So we need to mobilize very widely a bunch of financial tools and financial partners. So I think it's a key in the knowledge sharing. And a third topic about knowledge sharing is also about some methodologies that we have built about optimizing the impact of large projects. Okay, and there we developed this methodology to support governments and political bodies in the way of, with a given number of streetlights or a given budget, to optimize the impact on the largest possible population. And it's some very specific knowledge that we have developed on the basis of cartography, of mapping, of really analyzing what is the impact of one streetlight on some communities and ecosystems. And I think it's very important because we capitalize on this knowledge, on this unique knowledge we created, but we capitalize to give this, to share this knowledge and to help solar lighting infrastructure really scale on the continent.
Thank you so much. And in what you've said there, I think this idea of localizing some of the training is quite interesting too, because again, it's showing concretely how you can empower local communities. There's also a really interesting point there that you raised about the finance being an enabler, and we'll turn to Olivier in a second on sharing some examples of how that's really critical. Just moving across to Axel now, we wondered, scaling up biochar, obviously as a nature-based solution, there might be slightly different levers that you perceive in terms of the importance of scale, but which drivers do you think are quite critical in the months and years ahead? I think the idea that it might be more around finance, or is it more around collaboration, or is it more on the actual technologies that are required to create biochar? We were wondering how you see some of those levers to scale.
Thank you. So biochar, as I was explaining before, is in theory a great product, but hasn't found a model to scale. And so what we're trying to do is to find what needs to be unlocked so that basically biochar gets at its full potential and has impact at scale on climate, on agriculture. So the first thing is really to make the solution desirable by local populations. Because you can't come and say, okay, guys, I have a great solution, I'm going to impose on you and you will see life will be wonderful. So for people to actually ask for a biochar solution, they need to understand that they will get lots of co-benefits. Of course, they will get the agricultural benefits of the biochar. But if you show them, they can actually get that in a very circular model where they basically have waste products that they can, can be converted into biochar, and this biochar will go into their own fields and for their own benefit. Then you have a very powerful loop that basically makes people want to participate to the model. The second co-benefit is you say, I'm going to create jobs. I'm going to create well-paid and qualified jobs in rural areas. And so that helps the local environment and usually gains a lot of support from the local communities, the mayors, and so on. And then the third thing is say, I'm going to bring electricity. I'm going to bring power generation in areas that lack power generation. And again, this is a very strong driver to say, okay, this solution, actually, we want it. And what we're experiencing in the few sites where we have a plant or where we're building plants is that actually people say, please come, And so that's the first thing, it needs to be desirable. The second thing is that it needs to be easy to implement. Today, there's no suitable technology that to produce biochar that would be kind of plug and play. It's complex to install, it's complex to operate, it's very expensive. And so what we're trying to do is to find a technology and package it that will be super easy. You bring it, it takes a couple of days to install, you run it, very easy to run, very automated, easy to maintain, and suited for tropical environments. So can withstand, high temperature, lots of humidity, and so on and so forth. So it needs to be as simple to install as a solar panel, to go on with the analogy we were just discussing before. And then it needs to be low cost, because of course, if it's super expensive, it will never fly. And I think the third very important element for scaling is you need to find an economic model and you need to find funding. Because if it's something that will rely on some kind of subsidies, it will never scale. You might get a few local wins, but it will not scale. And so in the model we're trying to develop, we have funding from the carbon markets, and that helps basically fund the assets that will produce the biochar in the countries. In a way, it's a north-south financing because it's corporates from the north trying to offset their unabatable emissions that basically bring the funding that goes down to building the production assets in tropical developing countries. So it's a very virtuous mechanism.
Yeah.
And then as a corporation or as a company, Net Zero needs funding. So we need to raise money and find investors willing to invest in a profitable business to help scale, because you need to manage the R&D, develop the model, have the teams on the ground, and so on. So actually, it's those three factors. I would say make the solution desirable, make the solution easy to operate, to install and operate, and find a kind of workable financial model that makes the solution profitable.
Great, thank you so much. And I think you've actually addressed one of the questions that came up in the chat around the local nature of this as well. So thank you for doing that. It was actually around the cost of farmers and like what's the financial return. So thank you for addressing one of the questions that came in. Just moving to Jean, I'm going to merge two here. I can see a question in the chat that's come up around actually how you potentially work across the supply chain with some of the partners. Someone's asked, is this competition is that an issue in terms of bringing the supply chain together? But I think, how do you see collaboration as being quite an important lever in terms of the work that you're doing?
Yes, we do cooperate with. It's part of our core business to make collaborate people that don't usually work together. So large distribution networks, large retailers with charities, food banks, and so on, and with also the consumers. So we're trying to organize everything and to make sure that there is no conflict of interest and that anybody is happy. So yes, it's very important to collaborate and to make sure that everybody gets its fair share of the unsold products, because sometimes you can cannibalize. If you're only doing a B2C mobile application, then you can probably divert some volumes from the food banks. But at the same time, if you only do solidarity, then you cannot give back purchasing power to consumers. So that's our position, to be one step ahead and to be able to route the volumes towards the adequate channels. And so yes, collaboration is important, but we also on a competitive market. As I mentioned, we are not the only food waste solution. So there is respect, but it's also a competitive market, and we're also fighting for the same volume and fighting for market shares. Are any other business? I'm not talking about the food banks and so on. Those are partners, but other anti-food waste solutions are also competitors. Let's be clear, and we are all pushing in the same direction, and we are all rather friends and collaborative, but it's still competition and like any business. But maybe one last point on my side would be to make sure that everybody understands what extent regulation can be a powerful tool to empower this thing. Because in France, we have been pioneering in fighting food waste through two regulatory levers. First one is a tax incentive that is giving a 60% tax credit on in-kind donations for the corporates that are playing the game. So it's a positive tax incentive. And on the other hand, we also have a law fighting food waste and banning food waste. So in France now, since 2017, it's forbidden to destroy food in the supermarkets above 400 square meters. So it's, and if you don't respect that law, you can get a 10,000 euro fine. So we have those two things, like positive tax incentive and the law for banning food waste. And that has helped us very much to evangelize, say so, the sector, and to make sure that food waste becomes a true top priority and not just a nice to have solution for CSR policies.
No, that's great, and thank you so much for touching upon regulation as well. We haven't heard it as much so far, but I think the example that you shared shows that it's really quite a core lever in the sector that you're operating in, and actually that it can be really a big push factor as well. So yes, we're hearing that a lot from COP as well. Just conscious of the time, so I'm going to merge a couple of things for you, Olivier. So how do you see the certain levers that are required to accelerate? A lot of the panel talked about finance and the vital role of finance, and obviously with the Solar Impulse Venture Fund, you're definitely scaling up. So what levers do you think are required to scale?
As a fund or fund manager, I think that's my biggest personal challenge, and I'll be careful when not over-promising with Jean and Ignace on the goal, but bringing more than money is really what I found the most difficult. Hopefully, money is already fine, but startups and innovation in general needs visibility, credibility, and the Solar Impulse label to that extent is helping. So we're trying to push our companies, our portfolio companies, in front of the scene as much as we can. Make business introduction. At the end of the day, it's really about generating leads, pilots, business relationships, using our own network. So that those companies can actually grow. And to summarize, I'll leave you some time for a question, but summarize, I think it's really about giving the management team that we've bet on, because as an investor, we actually choose the team we're betting on and give them some space and the means to focus on business. It's not the easy part, making sure that we can actually have them grow the business and not just waste their time on fundraising, for example. That's a huge waste of the management time. So hopefully with the foundation, our new investors and the BNP Paribas network will be stronger today with this new fund that we've been in the past, and hopefully more helpful to those companies going forward.
No, that's great, and I think it resonates quite a lot with what Michelle said on the mentorship idea. I think clearly in terms of as a bank and as a fund, we can bring much more than just capital. I think this cross-sectoral knowledge sharing is really vital and a big part of that journey in terms of scaling up the entrepreneurship as well. I'm just conscious that we want to probably finish on one last question for all of you, really. I think in the chat, I can see a couple of questions coming in, so I'm going to summarize them as one final question for each of you in terms of closing remarks. So we've got a lot of questions around the localization of the technologies that are being implemented. Some people say that, how do you see certain obstacles ahead? But I'd like to frame all of those in terms of if we were to look at this in a kind of year's time, what would you hope to see? I'd love to end on a point of hope. Just a quick kind of probably 20 seconds from each of you, if that's good, in terms of what you would hope to see if we were to have this conversation, in a year's time. Is it technology scale? Is it that you want localized impact? Is it that you want more finance? Like, where would you love to see this this conversation go? I might start with Olivier and then work backwards. That's good.
I think I very much like the idea that you can't impose a technology or a solution to local populations. So you need to be really explain what it brings, and then convince people that they should adopt it.
Thank you, Olivier. Moving on to Jean, maybe on to you. If we were to have this chat in a year's time, what would you hope to have seen by then?
I would love to see more and more workers, people, employees joining companies and initiatives with a positive impact. I think if we win the war for talents, then we will have a massive inflow of energy coming to solve the big issues of our current society.
Amazing, mobilizing minds. I like that. Michelle, on to you. What would you like to see if we were to have this conversation?
Yeah, I think we'll definitely want to see a year from now and even more years after that, more of the practical action and definitely solutions that respond to specific problems. I think the idea of localizing the knowledge and innovation is very key so that we don't duplicate efforts for nothing, but we focus on things that really will come with clear impact on the ground.
Thank you so much. And Axel, on to you, and then finishing up with you.
Well, end of next year, we will have probably around 5 biochar plants up and running. And what I'd like is to have, 20 areas around fighting to say, can you come please and build another biochar plant? Because it will mean we will have cracked the model where basically it becomes the local population asking for it. And that's the way to scale, and that's the way for impact.
Amazing. So empowering the local impact. And then Ignace, maybe finishing with you, and then I'm going to wrap up for about 10 seconds.
Yes, well, in fact, our longer term vision is really to have universal access to energy for everyone worldwide. And we contribute to this effort on the lighting side, on the street lighting, but it's a huge challenge worldwide. And I think it's doable in the next 10 years, probably. And on the mature countries, our dream is that, well,
okay, I think we may have lost Ignace, but I feel like if I had to anticipate what he was going to say, which is quite tricky to do, I'd guess that he would look at that.
Power.
Yeah, I think it's the power at scale potentially. I think he's clearly talked about those solutions being something that they're trying to develop for everyone, and I think it's potentially a point about scale. So just closing remarks from my side as moderator. I think thank you so much all for sharing these insights. I think it's a real privilege to hear from each of you. I think we may have Ignace back, by the way, hopefully. But it's a real privilege to hear from all of you. There's some really common catalytic themes that were explored today. I think the idea of localizing impact is really vital, but equally localizing that impact in a way which is learning from others, whether that is learning from others through mentorship, intergenerational leadership, learning from others in terms of different sectoral contexts, crucially collaboration. I think all of you have shared examples of where collaboration is actually really critical for scale. Finance obviously has a role to play, but I think that a core part of this is beyond the finance. The kind of skills-based support that's required to actually help entrepreneurs is crucial and vital. Importantly, I think the ambition as well. I think in everything that each of you have said, there's a real passion and ambition and steadfast focus on actually helping and creating impact and scale. So I think that leaves us with a real ending of optimism. And I'd love to thank you all for bringing that to the panel today. I think I've certainly left this discussion feeling a lot more hopeful about the state of the world and the solutions being out there. Often people say that, the technologies don't exist, but I think all of you are proving that they do. And it's actually about bringing those minds together and finding ways to solve those challenges. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you everyone for putting questions in the chat and for having such an engaging discussion with us all. And do stay connected to the panelists as well. And we'd welcome to continue the conversation.